Hey guys, this is Esther. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Craft with Me, True Crime Tuesday. If you're new to my channel, Craft with Me, True Crime Tuesday is when I sit down and work on some kind of project and I talk about a true crime case and then we just comment about it in the comment section. Before I start, I do want to say that viewer discretion is advised. I'm going to try to be as not very descriptive of the situation, but I will get into some details, so viewer discretion is advised. If you get offended or if you don't like listening to crime details, then yeah, I do suggest that you skip this video. But if you would like to hear the full story, the full case, then let's get started. Before I start with my story today, I'm going to be working on my Valentine's journals for my Etsy. So let's get started. Alrighty guys, so today's case or today's story comes from Colorado Springs. And this is a show I watch and it's called Homicide Hunter. And these are the stories from the case files of Detective Lieutenant Joe Kendra. He is like some really fancy schmancy detective from back in the day. So we're going all the way back to 1979, a cold morning in January. This case is about the Cisneros family, and Mr. and Mrs. Cisneros were married at a young age. They were just a regular, everyday American couple, and they had two little boys. They had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So Mr. Cisneros worked for like the military, and he would leave to work early in the mornings and his wife would stay home with the kids. Now, I don't remember if it says why, but Mrs. Cisneros was going to take the boys to a neighbor who was going to be watching them. Now, the neighbor lived downstairs, not in the, or I don't know, can't remember if she lived right in the apartment right below them or if she lived just downstairs, but I don't think she lived right below them. I might be wrong though. Again, I told you what the show's called. I'm just kind of scratching the surface. Y'all can do your own detective work and look into it more. So she was going to go and take the kids to the neighbor, and the neighbor notices that it's the time, because she used to watch kids. That was her job. Back in the day, you didn't need license or anything. You were just like, yeah, I can watch your kids. So she would watch like all these kids all the time. So she notices that Mrs. Cisneros is late with the boys. So she goes upstairs to her apartment to ask her, hey, are you gonna still bring the kiddos on by? So she knocks on the door and there's like no answer. Like Mrs. Cisneros does not answer. And so she knocks again and still no answer. But this time, as she's knocking, she hears like scuffling, or she calls it in the show when they're interviewing her, she calls it some ruckus is what she hears. And she doesn't want to intrude, or she doesn't want to seem, I guess, nosy. So she thinks, oh, maybe Mr. and Mrs. Cisneros are having like a fight. And so she just walks away. She walks away and goes to her apartment and makes nothing of it. She's like, okay, well, I guess she's not bringing the kids over. And she goes on her merry way with her merry day. So she's in her apartment, and like a few hours later, she starts hearing like this commotion of sirens, and she kind of looks out her window and notices that the coroner's office, there we go, is there. And she's like, oh my gosh. So she gets this feeling and she runs upstairs, but by the time she gets upstairs, the cops are there, and it's like all full of like cop business. So they're like, no, you can't come up here. And she's like, oh my gosh, my friend. Mrs. Cisneros' home is a total crime scene right now. So they call on Lieutenant Joe Kendra, the detective. So he gets there, and he goes into the apartment to see, do his detective work and start looking at the crime scene and start analyzing what it is that could have happened and all that fun detective stuff. So the detective is there, and he starts analyzing the scene, and he starts going through all the, just visualizing first. Like he says he stands by the door, and he's just checking out the scene to see what he can see. And Mrs. Cisneros is laying on the bathroom floor, and she has a blanket covering her, and the amount of blood that was there was just so much. It was just a lot, and you can tell that something violent had happened in there. Cheers, y'all. And upon further investigation of Mrs. Cisneros, they realize that she has signs of strangulation, and she has been stabbed 60 times. 60 times, y'all. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to do a side note here, but really? 60 times? Like, I mean, I'm no, like, professional murder person, but I'm pretty sure that once or twice would have been enough. Anyways, let's continue. She also has some signs of sexual assault. The tub has some water in it, almost as if she had been getting the tub ready to give maybe one of the babies a bath, one of her children a bath. So it's like red. It's super red from, of course, all the blood. And they also see some bloody handprints on the door hinge, it's the door hinges, the door jambs, the door frame of the bathroom, which indicates to the detectives that she was still alive, and she was kicking and screaming and trying to not go into that bathroom. I just don't understand why nobody heard her. It was, still early enough where there's people at home. I mean, I don't know, y'all. Sometimes I'm confused. I mean, they probably, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can think of as to why she wouldn't scream is if maybe he was covering her mouth or he punched her in the mouth. But even if he punched her, she could still scream. I don't know. That kind of always, when people live in apartment complexes and they never hear anything. When I used to live in apartment apartment complex. Oh my gosh, how do you say it? I don't know. But anyways, when I used to live in apartments, like, dude, we could hear everything that was going on with our neighbors next door, upstairs, to the side of us. Everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, if you know what I mean. Anyways. So then the detectives move on to continue searching through the apartment. And in one of the bedrooms, the boys' bedrooms, because remember they had two boys, they find the body of the 2-year-old. He could have been spared. The 22 stabbings. Yes, I said 22. Can you believe it? 22. I can't even with this guy. So the detectives see that he's laying there, and they go into the master bedroom, which is the parents' bedroom, and they find the other boy, and he is 4 years old, and he has been stabbed 19 times. But not only that, because I mean that wasn't enough. They also find a barbell there next to the little boy, and it has been used on his head. And he goes through the whole apartment, and they notice that there is no type of forced entry into the apartment. So not only did they not find forced entry, they also didn't find anything was missing. So this wasn't like a robbery gone wrong. It was just nothing was missing. All their electronics, all their house stuff was still there, and her purse was right there. So the detectives right there knew that this was just pure intent of assault. They also couldn't find the weapon that was used to, do the situation. So they also did notice that the puncture wounds were not shaped like a knife would be. They were more like circular. So they were trying to find what it could have been that was used, but there was no murder weapon, so whoever did it took it with him. So the only like weapon that was found was the barbell that was next to one of the little boys, but not the actual weapon that caused the punctures. But then one of the forensic people that, they're taking pictures and bagging all the evidence, they find a pen. And this pen has like white specks on it, kind of like, that Dollar Tree mesh that we love. Yeah, like that. It has white specks on it. So the detective tells them, you know what, bag it up. And at this time, their main or suspect is Mr. Cisneros, because of course they always try to, start with the husband, because a lot of the times, sadly, it is the husband. So they are going and they're thinking that maybe it was the husband that did it. So they're thinking, there's no first entry. Could it have been Mr. Cisneros? Even though they are the average, typical family, but they're thinking they're a young couple with 2 young kids. Could Mr. Cisneros have snapped? Could he have caught her cheating and snapped and acted that way? Could he be cheating and wanted to get out of the marriage? Could he have just snapped and gone crazy because of his line of work? So there's like these possibilities that maybe they're not out of the possibility of being able to happen. So they're now going to interview him and ask him questions, because he is right now their only suspect, or he is the one they're trying to either eliminate him as a suspect or, catch him as the killer. So when they start to interview him, because Mr. Cisneros was the one who found her, he came home from work and found her and the boys, and he's the one that made the phone call. And sometimes it happens when the killers are the ones who act all distressed and, oh my god, I found her and I don't know what happened, I just got back from work. So they take him and they start asking him questions like, where were you between this time and this time? And so he says, I was at work. He says he left his house around 4 or 4:30, I can't remember, a.m. and he left to work and he clocked in at like 5:30 or something like that. And I think his break, I don't really know, I can't remember. He tells his supervisor if he could use the phone to call his wife. So he calls his wife and there's no answer. So he's like, okay, what's going on? Because she should be home, but okay, what is? She's not answering. He goes back to work and then returns about an hour later, I think he says, or later. I can't remember if he said an hour later or just later in general. And says that he tried calling her back again. And still there's like no answer from her. So as soon as he gets off of work, he rushes home because he's like, okay, what's going on? Why isn't my wife answering me? And he gets home. It's about a 30-minute drive. So he gets off around 12 and he drives home, and he gets home and finds his wife. He says that when he found her, her body is on her back, kind of like half in the tub, half out the tub. And he takes her out and lays her down on the bathroom floor and covers her with a blanket, because he can tell that she's, not alive. He's like, he didn't know what to do. He says he thought he was going crazy. But yeah, so he covers her with a blanket and puts her on the floor, and then he kind of remembers, oh, the boys. So he goes and looks for the boys and finds his boys, and then calls the police. So the police call comes in around 12:40 or 12:45. There's like a 5 to 10 minute window frame from when he got home to when the phone call was made, the detectives think, yeah, that's enough time for him to have maybe killed Mrs. Cisneros, because it was like a blitz attack, crazy attack, and all that could have been done in that short amount of time. So then they finally eliminate him as a suspect when the coroner calls and says that her time of death and the boy's time of death would be around 9 to 11 a.m. So now the detectives don't have like a suspect or a person they're per se looking for, but they do have what Mr. Cisneros told them, which was that when he came home, the door was unlocked, which was weird to him. And she made sure that the door was always locked. So they're thinking, okay, so if Mrs. Cisneros always had the door locked, that means that this person some way bamboozled his way in here, like meaning she opened the door for him, or he let himself in. Because remember, there's no forced entry. So of course, this case hits the media because it's such a sad case, because, you know, kids are involved, and they start getting some tips. But one of the tips, which, I mean, this really has nothing to do with the case, but I just thought it was like lame that people would do that, was for a man, and they even give his address, like, yeah, your murderer lives at this address. And so the detectives go because they have to, you know, check out all the clues that come in. Turns out it wasn't the person that did it, but just some guy that somebody was like upset with and tried to just say that it was him just to get back at him. Like, who does that? Anyways, so yeah, they after they checked out that clue, they were like, yeah, this isn't our guy. So then he's all like, let's go back to the crime scene, y'all. So they go back to the crime scene. This guy either let himself in or she let him in. So they start thinking that maybe it's somebody that lives in the apartments, and Mrs. Cisneros let him in because she recognized them from the complex. So they start talking to like neighbors. One of the neighbors that lived like across from her apartment said, yeah, I was out walking my dog, and when I came back from walking my dog, I was going into my apartment and I noticed a man going into their apartment. He opened the apartment with a key. So the detectives are like, what? Okay, tell us more, tell us more. So he then tells them, yeah, he was wearing like these khaki pants and he was wearing this checkered shirt. And he's like going to town giving a description on the guy. Like, he tells them he's about 6 feet tall and he has like this little afro haircut. And the detectives are like, are you sure that's what you saw? He's like, yeah, 100% sure. And then he tells them like what would blow the whole case open. He's like, yeah, I know his name. And they're like, what the what? And he's like, yeah, it's Jimmy, the maintenance man. Which made total sense because, you know, maintenance guys go into people's apartments. And that's why the guy didn't make anything of it when he saw him going in, because he thought that he was going in to probably fix something in the apartment. Side note, when I was younger, back in the day, like way back in the day, I remember that we used to live in these apartments, and whenever something was wrong, the maintenance guy would just go in. And sometimes I'd be home alone from school, and he would just walk in, and then when he'd see me, he'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm here to fix whatever, whatever. And I'd be like, okay. And I would go in my room, close my door, and lock it. And then I'd kind of peek out to see if he was there. But what I'm saying is, back in the day, that was normal. Maintenance people would just come in and whatever. But nowadays, it's different. Like, now somebody either has to be there, or if nobody's going to be there, they have to have permission from the tenants to go in. And I know this because, like I said, I used to live in apartments before we moved here to the house we have now. But yeah, that's kind of how it worked. And it was normal for the maintenance guys to be going in and out of the apartments. He's like, yeah, it's the maintenance man, Jimmy. So his name is Jimmy, y'all. And he says, yeah, and Jimmy lets himself in with the key. Now, they have to go find this Jimmy to make sure that it's not just another accusation like, you know, the one from before. So they go to the maintenance supervisor's office, And they're like, hey, you know, do you have this guy named Jimmy that works here? And he's like, oh yeah, James Perry, I think's his name. But he's not here right now. I gave him the day off, or the morning off, and he's gone, so I haven't seen him. He says, but I have his address. Do you guys want it? And so the detectives are like, yeah, let's get his address. So they also ask the maintenance supervisor, so when you guys have these maintenance guys, do they get a master key? And then the supervisor says, no, the maintenance people do not have a master key. So now they are headed over to his house and they get a search warrant so they can search his house. But not only do they do a search warrant, but they request a background check for him to see, you know, what he's been up to, his activities, where'd he come from, like just to check him out. Well, it turns out that Mr. Jimmy James moved from New York City to Colorado Springs. And in New York City, he had been convicted of first-degree manslaughter and had served 14 years in prison. So he wanted to, you know, I guess like a lot of men do when they go to jail, they finally find Jesus and they want to be. Now, I'm not saying this like sarcastically. I mean, some men truly and honestly do, I guess. I don't know. So he says he wants to become a pastor, but he needs to attend the Nazarene Bible College, and the parole, as part of his parole, you know, to release him, they're like, okay, we're gonna let you, but you have to go to Colorado Springs and go to that Nazarene Bible College so that you can become a pastor. And yeah. And he's like, yeah, for sure. So they make it to his house, and when they're at his house, he's not there, but his common law wife is. So they tell her, you know, what's going on, that they think he is a suspect, and she's like, yeah, well, he's not here. And they're like, okay, but we have a search warrant. So they go in and they start searching the house and they start talking to her. So where is Jimmy? And she's like, he hasn't been here. And they're like, when was the last time you saw him? And she says, oh, the last time I saw him was last night at 10:30. When he came home, because he was working on an apartment and he was painting it, and he came home around 10:30 saying that he was hungry, so he came home to eat, and I haven't seen him since. That he was probably out with like his girlfriends. What does that even mean? I'm gonna do a side note here because y'all, I can't even with this girlfriend situation. Why was it that back in the day women thought, and I mean 79 is really not back in the day, but back in the day it was like normal. Like my grandma would tell me stories about how my grandpa had like these side ladies, and she was like, I was okay with it because I knew he always came home, and you know, if your husband ever does that to you, you just have to know that you are the. And I was like, girl, I know you're not trying to tell me that it's okay for my honey to cheat on me, because no, abuelita, that is not okay. I don't know, my grandma was old. Anyways, back to the case. So she tells him that he's probably out with his girlfriends and that she has not seen him. So then they ask her, what does she do? Like, what is her job? She says that she does the cleaning. Like, she is the cleaning lady for the apartments. So when people move out, she's the one who goes and cleans the apartments. And they ask her, do you have a master key to get into these apartments? And she's like, why, yes, I do. And they're like, interesting. Can we see that key? She's like, sure. So she goes to where she has the key, and guess what? Guess. Yeah, it's missing. Lo and behold, it's gone and missing, and she doesn't know where it could be because she always has it in this little drawer. And now the key is poof, gone. So they continue to search the house, hoping to find the key. And they can't really find anything else until they get to the laundry room and they see a bottle of bleach on top of the washer. And, you know, like as soon as they walk in there, they can smell it. So they open the washing machine, and inside the washing machine is a pair of khaki pants and a like checkered shirt. So now they're like, dude, this is our guy right here. Like everything, although circumstantial, everything points to him. All this evidence is just directly taking us back to Jimmy. So now they want to find something that directly links him. Like there's no other thing, but you know, it's Jimmy. Again, remember, back in the day, they didn't have DNA. They couldn't do that. So they go back to the maintenance office, and the maintenance guy says, no, we haven't had any apartment paintings in the last 2 months, except for that one apartment that James was painting. You know, Detective Joe Kendra says, can you take me to where the bottles of paints are? We're going to have to take them in as evidence, because what they want to do is compare that paint to the paint found on the pen that was in Mrs. Cisneros' apartment. So Detective Joe Kendra leaves with the maintenance manager, but the other detective stays behind and says, hey, do you mind if I use your phone? So he had to make a phone call for whatever, because, you know, nobody had cell phones back in the days. They didn't even have pagers. So he's using the phone, and in comes this guy, and he says, hey, are you done with the phone? I need to use it. And the detectives are like, yeah, that's fine. Which he finds weird that this guy comes in, because he thought he had interviewed all the maintenance people, but this guy comes in, and he's obviously maintenance because he's in there working. Starts like dialing the number, and as he's dialing the number, the detective is like looking at him, and he notices that he has a watch on, and on the watch there is paint splatter. And not only is there paint splatter, but he also notices what to him looks like blood. And as he's analyzing this through his brain, the guy says, hey, Mrs. Johnson, it's me, Jimmy. Okay, maybe he didn't have that accent. Is that how New Yorkers talk? I don't know. That's me. You guys know we have to add a little pizzazz in here, because these are, horrible cases. Anyways, he's like, Miss Johnson, it's me, Jimmy. So as soon as he says that, the officer is like, what? This is him. This is the guy we're looking for. So he draws his weapon, and he arrests him right there. And he's like, Jimmy, you're under arrest for the murder of Mrs. Cisneros and her children. And they cuff him, and they take him into police station. And while he's in the police station, they read him his rights. And he lawyers up. He lawyers up right away. And there's nothing the detectives can do. So then when the trial starts, prosecutors feel that they have a strong case. They're like, yeah, we have a strong case, because even though they didn't have the weapon, they didn't have his fingerprints in there, what they had was more, I guess, circumstantial. They did have like human blood on his shoes. They did have the blood on his watch. The lab had matched the bucket paint to the paint on the pen. So they're feeling really confident. They're like, yeah, we got this, because, we always want to win against the bad people. So now it's his defense team's turn, and they do something that they weren't expecting. They let Jimmy, take the stand and speak in behalf of himself. So he gets up there, and he's like all spiffied up, he's cleaned up, and he's up there, and he's like, yeah, man, I'm just trying to be a priest, and I'm a reformed man, and, I don't know what y'all talking about. He's claiming that he wants to help people because he made mistakes. He didn't have anybody to support him, and he wants to be a support system for them. So basically, he's speaking greatness of himself, and he's trying to say that he feels attacked because of his past life. How dare the Colorado Springs police say that he did anything wrong? So basically, he's putting himself as a victim as well, because he didn't do this crime, but the police is out to get him. And so after he takes the stand and, of course, becomes the martyr and the victim, both sides rest their case, and now it goes into the hands of the jury. So then after a few days of deliberating, because I guess it took them that long to decide, they came back with a verdict. And so they read it, and they're like, we, the jury, find the defendant, James, not guilty. Oh, what? Yep. They said not guilty, y'all. And he was a free man. So after being acquitted, James decides that he wants to move back to New York. So he moves back to New York. So now he's like this free man, right? Au contraire, mon chéri. Detective Joe Kendra gets a phone call, and it is the New York City Police Department, and they tell him that somebody, for some reason, decided to throw Mr. James out of the 10th floor window in the Bronx. And yeah, well, he didn't survive that one. But basically, that's it, guys. That is the story of the Cisneros families and their attacker, James. But they called him Jimmy. So yeah, guys, that is it for today's story or case. And it's a sad one, for Mr. Cisneros. But, James didn't get away with it, really. Let me know what you guys think about this case in the comments section below. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope that you guys like this video, and if you haven't yet, subscribe and join our tiny family. Hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.